Welcome to Enlightened Omnivore, the monthly podcast that serves up a delicious mix of food, sustainability, and travel. I'm your host, Steve Sabaker, here to explore the wonders of mindful eating. Join me each month as I dig into the stories behind our food system, discover new ways to live sustainably, and embark on culinary adventures around the globe or right in your very own kitchen. Get ready to expand your palate and your mind, one bite at a time. My guest today is Cynthia Rebolledo, an independent food and culture journalist covering Los Angeles and Orange County. She's a former food editor over at OC Weekly, which is how I met her years ago at Electric City Butcher. But she's continued in a pretty prolific career across Southern California, reporting on all kinds of food and culture topics. This year, she got recognized by the SoCal Journalism Award, and her recent stories have ranged from all kinds of things like how social media is impacting food to immigration and how it's impacting the restaurant industry in Southern California. So I've got tons of questions for Cynthia, and I'm really excited to have somebody from my local community tell me about food and what's going on in Southern California. So thank you, Cynthia, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be on.
Cynthia, we go way back. I mean, 5, 6, 7 years. It's been a while, but I always admired the kind of work you were doing at OC Weekly, and also your commitment to the local community there in Santa Ana, where we were based. When did you first realize food would be a core part of how you would tell stories on culture and identity?
That's a great question. So I didn't initially set out to be a journalist. If anything, I went to school for film, radio, TV, film at Cal State Fullerton, and I thought I was going to make movies. But now, years later, and reflecting back on everything that has influenced me within my career, it was definitely OC Weekly. I grew up reading it. It was definitely KCET. It was all these publications that highlighted culture. And so when I was in college, I had a radio station. It was part of the school radio station, and I would have guests on and I would interview them. First half hour was questions. Second half hour was whoever I interviewed got to pick the playlist. So it was really interesting. It was really fun. I think there was guests where I had a historian on and we listened to death metal for his half hour. I never would have put those two together. I had photographers, chefs, professors. And when I got an internship with KCET, that really exposed me to more type of culture writing. But it was really OC Weekly that I started off as an intern with that I to this day call my grad school, where I truly learned how to write about my community, how to see food in a different light. I've always loved food, grew up with food. Even being part of the OC Weekly, I would take their guides and go and try all the food myself with a friend who ended up being a chef. So we both have been influenced by the OC Weekly in that sense. So I would really say that it was the OC Weekly that got me thinking about foodways, thinking about different cultures and how to approach writing about food and sharing it with others. That really influenced me.
Yeah, and I love that you just shared the word foodways. This was news to me. So could you kind of tell my listeners a little bit more about that? What do you mean by foodways?
Well, foodways just depends on how you're looking at it, right? You're looking at the foodways of a culture. You're looking at foodways of a region, even foodways of a state, and how they use food, how they grow food, and how they cook with food.
Now, did you grow up in Orange County?
I did. I grew up in Yorba Linda.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah. My grandparents were in Fullerton, not too far from there.
Right.
What traditions really did you absorb as a child? I mean, in what ways do you feel most connected to food culturally?
Food is so important for me culturally. There is something in our family that I hold like a family heirloom, and it's queso añejo. My family has been making it since the 1800s. We're a family of queseros. We're from La Laguna in Zacatecas. And, it's just a small little rancho, and that's what they do. They make cheese, and they've been making it forever. And so if there is anything that I've feel so connected to, it is this cheese. It's a hard, a little salty, stinky cheese. It's, lovingly nicknamed queso de pata, which is translates to foot cheese. But it is really this sense of pride for, that region. And it really is a cultural mark for that region. It's to the point where when you go into that small rancho, they have a marquee that says the land of queso añejo.
That's amazing. Yeah, because cheese making is fascinating for me in Central America and Mexico specifically, but it's my understanding and my familiarity is with queso fresco, or these short aging cheeses that are softer and yeasty, but and salty too, which is great. But yeah, how do you use this cheese in cooking and in culturally?
So with this particular cheese, the way my family, because each family cooks with it different. That's something else that I'd like to mention. Everyone has even this specific cheese is made throughout Zacatecas, but each farmer, it depends on the grass and what the cows eat. You could have one farm from another farm, and there can be different notes within their cheese just because of their land or, what they feed their cows. But as far as consuming the cheese, the way I grew up eating it was enchiladas rojos, and that's it. It's just the cheese inside. It's really simple. Quesadillas is probably my most favorite way to eat it, on a corn tortilla, and it's just so simple, and it melts beautifully. And you dip that in some chile de árbol, and it's the perfect meal for me. It's also great sprinkled on top of frijoles or any dish, to be honest.
Now you're making me hungry. One of the things too that you've been writing about lately is technology and the media in general and how it's influencing food. And you talked about social media and exploring how people are reclaiming those foodways that you just mentioned, reclaiming those food cultures that in Southern California, we like to extract. There's lots of people taking and learning from all the different cultures, but I was surprised that you said that social media might be working in reverse now and kind of reinforcing those cultural foundations. I have a bias. Social media is it's a necessary evil in my world, but it is one of those things where there's a lack of authenticity sometimes. What did you mean by social media kind of helping reclaim the specifically the Mexican foodways? I think you were talking about in Southern California.
Well, when I wrote about that, I was looking at food creators, so recipe developers, individuals that have used their social media platform to reach an audience and teaching them recipes, traditional recipes. And something about food is there's this misconception that everyone had their mother or their abuela or their tias passing down recipes. That just isn't the case for everyone, especially because of migration, because of being separated, having family on both sides of the border, or being in a family household where, there was an individual that I interviewed who is a food creator, and her mom worked 7 days a week. So she didn't have those home cooked meals, those times in the kitchen with her mother to learn these recipes. So she truly taught herself growing up. And so what she's doing now for countless people through social media is teaching them dishes that maybe they did grow up eating, or maybe they'd like to learn to make. And it is reconnecting people with their culture in a sense of community that is now this, social media hub. And people are grateful to her for that.
I guess that's another question. Kind of, how do you define authenticity? We're always, the clickbait articles out there are saying, hey, here's the 10 best tacos, or this is the best Oaxacan food you can find in Southern California. How do you identify and define authenticity? And is that even important anymore in the food debate?
For me personally, authenticity isn't a term that I like to use, or I try not to use in my writing. I feel like it could be exclusionary. I feel like, food is ever evolving. It's shared, it's borrowed, it is always growing in a sense. So when it comes to authenticity, what you may think is authentic might not be my authentic. Meaning, if I grew up in a house that made enchiladas one way and your family made it a completely different way, who's to say, how am I to say that your enchiladas aren't authentic? They're authentic to you. And that is what you grew up with. So I try to steer away from that term and instead look at food through tradition. Look at food with a familial exchange of recipes, of ingredients, which, even if you want to break that down, when people speaking regarding Mexican cuisine, you have immigration, you have migration, and when people came to wherever they landed within the United States, they might not have had access to ingredients to make the traditional dishes from their region. That is even another thing to look at when it comes to authenticity. Each state is drastically different. Each region is different. Each small pueblo, each small rancho, each city does things different from one another, and you can't say that isn't authentic. It is really what is traditional to them.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if we think about the world over, the diversity of food, my orientation is around when I visit my wife's family in France. There's a tradition of goat cheese in the south of France, that's very rich, but every neighborhood, every town has a different approach. And like you said, one store from the other that's making it could be coming, at it from a very different perspective or use a different ingredient. And I find it fascinating in Latin American culture or Latinx food, where there's such a brilliant diversity. And a lot of Americans only know a really narrow definition of Latin American food or Mexican food. Are there kind of generalities or ways to think about regions that help you as a food writer to kind of steer people or at least give them an overview if they aren't that familiar with the differences?
I mean, when it comes to that, I think, I also have to do my own research in regards to regions. I have to look at what ingredients they're using, what they have access to, what they're growing. I have lots and lots of food books. And then there's also really great writers out there. I think someone that has really covered the Mexican food culture here in Los Angeles and Orange County would be like Bill Esparza. He, for like over a decade has been covering these enclaves within Los Angeles of different, whether it's Central American food or Mexican food. And he really does his like homework on ingredients that they're using or what they have access to here and how they're adapting to that to try to create a traditional dish. So when it comes to me writing about regional areas, it's really me like going to writers like him and seeing what he's already, put out there to, make us all knowledgeable on the food. And then also me doing my own homework and looking into a state or a region or talking to individuals who are from those areas or chefs that are from those areas as well.
Well, let's bring it back to Southern California. I'm really curious to pick your brain about some of the places that you think are, kind of the essential Latin American food pilgrimage, if you will, in Southern California. So, I mean, I've lived on and off here for the last, 40 years, sometimes longer hiatuses, but certainly familiar with Southern California. And then obviously the last 15 living here full time. But where do you go, or where should somebody who's on a visit go to experience Latin American food here in Southern California? I know that's a huge question.
I was just about to say, that's a loaded question. You know what? It's it's everywhere. It's in loncheras, it's restaurants, but you have Los Angeles that has its enclaves of different regional cuisine. I would say East LA, Boyle Heights. If you want Central American, you're looking at off Vermont. You have Salvadoran stalls there. Here in Orange County, where I live, you can find different regional foods and amazing spots in Santa Ana. Means you have loncheras, you have, one that specializes in, Mexico City cuisine. You have some that are Baja focused and are doing great seafood out of a lonchera truck. And I would send people to those different regions. And going back to, I mentioned him earlier, Bill Esparza has these really wonderful guides throughout Los Angeles that breaks that down for people. And that's something that I think that if you're here for the first time, I'm sending a friend out, I would hand him one of his guides and say, go explore it.
Well, and that's great because I feel like having just gone traveling with my daughter, we went to Tanzania this summer, and I hadn't been backpacking in quite some time, and so I brought along my Lonely Planet, and I did Google searches, but basically was blown away by the culture now of digital information. Basically, there aren't these clearinghouses anymore to find the best spots. There we were using Instagram or bookings.com, which, seemed like a very corporate kind of site to find a hostel, to stay in. But restaurant scenes, I find in Los Angeles, the websites don't help me all that much. I mean, Yelp, TripAdvisor, even LAist, sometimes it's hard to find those places that I really want to go. You obviously have a great network of friends and colleagues, but do you use any specific digital platforms to help you kind of find new places?
Not really. What I turn to find new places is publications like LA Taco. They're a great platform for discovering great loncheras, street vendors, restaurants. I feel like they are always on that pulse. Going back again, giving Bill another shout out. His guides are phenomenal. I mean, but he's also a wonderful authority when it comes to Mexican food or Latino food in general. I tend to, go to these more independent platforms and publications because I feel like they're more on the ground than a Yelp type site, or like you said, a Bookings or a Resi, any of these digital platforms. They're actually there breaking down dishes, talking about what makes them special, and talking to the chef, or if it's a mom and pop spot, letting you know how to access it. Some of these, you're not going to find a person who's doing a regional dish in their backyard on a digital platform. You're just not.
Totally. I want to find more of those places. So let us know, like, who are some of the chefs, restaurants, or maybe even, like you said, the street vendors or the backyard or ghost kitchen type opportunities that are pushing the boundaries in Latin American cuisine here in Southern California?
There are so many. And I think, you have your Alta Cocina, you have your Alta California, you have Ray Garcia, who just opened up his Broken Spanish again in Culver City. And he's always been, pushing that forward. You're talking about pea guacamole, you're talking about albondigas in the chipotle sauce. Then you have amazing street vendors in Los Angeles, going back to Vermont, where you have Central American street vendors doing these dishes that are harder to find.
How have demographics changed a lot of these places? I mean, you're mentioning some communities that have long, rich histories of food culture and are kind of the main foodways here in Southern California. I remember experiencing Santa Ana through its big gentrification, and And we were often part of that as an example of maybe the direction the community didn't want to go, to have folks from outside the community bringing different kinds of foods or offerings that weren't consistent with the history. What are you seeing in the demographics and kind of the gentrification, or lately the other way, like things are getting harder for people? How is that affecting the food scene?
I think since the pandemic, the food scene has been drastically affected. Gentrification has been a key part of that. And especially, we were talking about Orange County and Santa Ana. We saw that right there in downtown. You had that in Highland Park. You had that in all these different areas of Los Angeles where you see gentrification coming in. But now, so more today, it isn't just gentrification that these businesses, these restaurants are facing. It's also ice raids, the current climate, that they aren't getting the customers that they once would get. People aren't going out of fear. People aren't vending outside. People aren't setting up their stalls like they once were because of this current climate. So there's a lot more than just gentrification now that I would say affecting these restaurants and these business owners.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know you've written a little bit about that, and specifically the example of the story of Mr. Diabolito, who was a street vendor. Could you tell us a little bit about that piece, and maybe if there's any updates?
Yes. So Mr. Diablito, as he's lovingly known on Instagram, he has his own page. He's a fruit vendor right there off of Bush on 4th Street in downtown Santa Ana. He's been there for over 30 years of vending. He especially has seen the change in downtown from once being a very prominent Latino hub to now more restaurants and a little bit more hipster coffee shops popping up, and maybe less quinceañera shops than there once were when he first started vending there. But when the National Guard was sent into Santa Ana in early June in Los Angeles, he left his corner of over 30 years for the very first time. He has always been out there and has never missed a day. And when that happened, he decided not to come out of fear. He said it was out of fear because he wasn't sure whether they would grab him or not, whether he has residency. It's, we're seeing it every day, but it's based off the way you look. It's based off the way you talk. It's just based off of what you do for a living. And he's a vendor, and that instilled fear. And I think it was a week that he took off, but then he decided to come back out. Once the community saw that happened and how he was fearful, the community really stepped up to support him, whether it was, pre-ordering his fruit cups. A local business, Alta Baja Market, was selling his fruit cups pre-prepared in her store. So he could just do a big drop off, and he didn't have to worry about going out until he was ready to go back to his corner. And then eventually he did come out. I think he was gone for about a week, and then he came back out to his corner, and everyone has an eye on him, just making sure he's all right. Despite, again, the fact that he is here and has residency, you just don't know, because that's what it's come down to. That's what we have to keep doing, especially in this current climate, is look at these restaurants, look at these vendors, look at these people that are very much part of our community and part of our fabric, and why it is so special, and support them in any way we can, whether that's, sharing a post of theirs on social media, whether it's buying a fruit cup, or, doing it in other ways.
And I remember him well. He was literally right outside where our shop was. It was right there on Bush and 4th. So, and he was there every day and well into the evenings, often when we were closing up. So what are some of the other challenges impacting Orange County with these raids? I mean, obviously people are afraid, and folks like Mr. Diabolito are not coming out, even if they are legal residents. What's happening to the restaurant scene in terms of workforce? I mean, I can only imagine it's really making it hard to stay in business.
Yeah, you're definitely seeing restaurants being affected in that capacity. You're seeing the workforce. I mean, what is the backbone of the industry? It is very much immigrants and who, is out in the fields collecting the food that go into these restaurants. It's immigrants. And they are such an important and vital part of what makes the industry work. And they are more than just, the people that pick the fruit, the people that pick the crops, more than just the people that work in the back of the kitchens. They feed us. They are human. They also deserve to have these rights and to be protected. And so as a result of what's been happening, it is affecting the restaurant industry. There is people not going into work out of fear. There's people staying home, especially during the raids. I think there was a restaurant in San Diego that was raided, where it took some workers. And then you have the street vendors, and then you have the loncheras. You've seen trucks being raided. You've seen street vendors being raided where their food is still cooking on the plancha and everyone was taken. So it's very much affecting this industry, and it's a matter of rapid response networks, local community, and your local city council to come up with ways to protect them and to protect each other in these circumstances.
Living in fear is no way to live life, especially here in Southern California. Switching gears a little bit here, if you could map out kind of the future of Latinx cuisine in Southern California in general, like where is it headed, and where do you expect us to be over the next 5 to 10 years?
When it comes to that, I really think it comes to going back to like the people who are reclaiming their food, reclaiming traditional recipes and pushing things forward. We're talking about chefs earlier, like a Ray Garcia, who's doing modern Mexican. I think how it's going to continue to grow is people just continuing to claim their foodways. There is a chef and writer who put out a cookbook called Salvi Soul. And I am referencing her. Her name is Carla Tatiana Vasquez. I'm referencing her because when she first set out to make her cookbook, she was looking for a recipe for a dish she grew up eating. And you can Google search lots of recipes, and you could get so many options. When she did that for a particular recipe, she couldn't find anything. So that inspired her to put out a Salvadoran cookbook.
She stumped the internet, basically.
She stumped the internet. So now, in that process, she also got a lot of no's to her cookbook, thinking that there wasn't a market for it. And since then, she has really put out the word for the cuisine. She's really pushed it forward. Recently she did an event called Ruta de Sabores that I think it got about 5 other Salvadoran chefs and writers, and it was pretty much like a small food festival. And I think that's how it's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to grow by reclaiming, or if it's not out there, then you're going to put it out there yourself. You're going to create that cookbook that doesn't exist. And there is absolutely going to be a market for it. When you have 2.5 million Salvadoran in California, there's absolutely a market for it. And that's what people are starting to realize. They're starting to realize that they can do it themselves, that they don't need someone else to do it for them.
You used a term, modern Mexican. Tell me more about that. What is modern Mexican food?
So you have these chefs. You have Chef Carlos Salgado. You have Ray Garcia. You have Wes Avila. These chefs that started taking traditional ingredients from Mexico with the surplus of bounty that we have within California. And then they also used their culinary training to bring that all together to create, dishes that are rooted in their culture, but also using techniques from the culinary training that they had. So in sense of when I talk about modern Mexican, I'm talking about, them making those dishes and putting their own twist on it, but it's still so familiar when you taste it.
And is there an ingredient that you're expecting to really break out in the next year? I mean, I feel like Oaxacan food in general has been a huge influence over the region in the last 10 years, maybe last 5 especially. But is there a specific ingredient or style of cooking that you think will break out in 2026?
You have all these different restaurants now that are doing their own masa and tortillas in-house. Corn is being looked at differently now, and tortillas are being looked at differently now. You have people using heirloom corn and again grinding it in-house and making their own tortillas in-house. I think that is something that is continually growing, has been growing. That isn't to say that there hasn't been tortillas here for a very long time. There absolutely has been. We have our people within Los Angeles that have been doing that, but I would say now you have chefs and restaurants doing that in-house and creating that themselves.
Is it the ingredient itself, the type of corn? Is it the grind of masa? Are they putting other ingredients in it? Like, what are people doing to take this traditional, basically this corn flour that's then turned into these delicious handmade tortillas? What are they doing differently?
They're not using maseca. is what they're doing, is the best way to put that. They're going
Maseca is the major brand for
yes.
The store-bought brand for tortillas.
Right. And they're going back to corn and its simplicity and nixtamalization, and finding heirloom corn and grinding that and finding purveyors and working with small farms within Mexico to get as close to that as possible. And it's really simple too. They're not putting much in it. They're really making it how it should be made and should taste. And that's maybe 3 ingredients. You have the corn, you have your water and maybe some salt, and that's it.
You grew up Mexican background,
yes,
right? We didn't really talk a lot about that. What are some of your favorite family traditions you remember as a child in food?
Pretty much any time we gathered, there'd be food around. So whether it was a birthday party, whether it was a holiday, whether it was just us getting together on a weekend, it was always surrounded by food. And that goes from uncles making their birria, like my uncle killing his own goat to make birria, to
and real birria, not the beef stuff that most people are making these days, because it's so hard to find goat. But I'm glad to hear, that's the traditional meat of birria.
It is, but there are regions you have borrego, you have goat, you also have beef. There are regions in Mexico that specialize in beef birria, which that is like Zacatecas. My family's from Zacatecas in Mexico. And, you will see beef there as well. That looking at Burritos La Palma, they specialize in beef birria. So it isn't to say that it's not traditional. It's that the fact that you have, these different regions that maybe use whatever animal they have and then move forward with that dish. So that is definitely one of the dishes that I grew up eating. Again, the cheese, going back to the cheese, that was put into gorditas, that was put into enchiladas, that was sprinkled on top of frijoles. I mean, a wheel of cheese was always on the table.
Is there any place that's selling that cheese now in Southern California, or is it mostly like, can you get it here?
You cannot. I mean, you can get cheese here, Mexican cheese here. You have like Northgate, who has created like their own great collection of cheeses, and then you have these small mercados that have always carried cheeses. But when you're talking about specific regional cheese, it's you can't reproduce that anywhere because it's specific to that farm, it's specific to that ranch, it's specific to that family. So it's really come down to being like a familial exchange. So you have someone pack that in their suitcase, and that's how you get it, and that's how I get it.
I love it. My suitcase always comes home from France with lots of goodies that probably I'm outing myself right now. And that, but it's so true. There are so many things that even in this day and age don't make it across borders. And the food culture of any country is so rich. It's like, how do you distill it down into one name or one menu, right? And you busted me. I was trying to find the authentic source here, and you're like, it's, birria doesn't have an authentic source. It's all these different regions, all these different ingredients, all these different influences. So, so great point there. What's one dish or one restaurant that you'd send a friend to in Southern California right now and say, you have to go experience this?
Probably Gelagetza.
Say more.
Yeah. So, it is a Lopez family, and they started off not with the restaurant. They started off just selling ingredients. The dad, the matriarch, with him and his wife, he came first, and then his family and his wife and kids came after. But when he first came to the United States, he was selling Oaxacan products, tlayudas and other ingredients, mole, out of the trunk of his car to the Oaxacan community that was in Los Angeles and then up in Central California as well. And when he saw that he was selling out of these ingredients that he was bringing back from Oaxaca, he started a restaurant, and that has grown significantly. And now the children are running it. His children are running it and doing amazing things with it. They source a good majority of their ingredients and products from Oaxaca, and really put so much care into every dish that is presented. And I would really call them, especially their dad, stewards of that cuisine at a time when it just didn't exist in markets here. Now you can get some Oaxacan products in markets. You could buy tlayudas, you can get mole, but they were really, really the stewards of that, and their restaurant is amazing, and I would probably send someone there for sure.
And where is it located?
In Koreatown.
Of course, because that's how Los Angeles works, right?
Yes.
Talking about the F word here, fusion, right? This has been something that I think Southern California has become synonymous with. And Jonathan Gold had his own interpretation of it. Did you get to work with Jonathan when you were at OC Weekly?
I didn't. I read him plenty, but I didn't have the chance to work with him now.
Well, what do you think about the word fusion? Is it still alive? Has it always been here? Is it something that we should avoid? Like, how is fusion food? What's the connotation for you?
It kind of, goes into that same realm of authenticity for me. I feel like all food is a form of fusion in a way. Now, is there boundaries to that? I believe so. I think that we shouldn't be throwing things on a wall and seeing what sticks. But they're going back to like food being shared and borrowed and adapted. Tomatoes is a great example. That wasn't a part of Italian cuisine. That is something that is from Mexico. And now it's very much part of their cuisine. People who don't know that food history would have never have thought that tomatoes weren't initially part of their food and culture there. So I don't have a problem with fusion. There are chefs of different nationalities that maybe one side is one culture and the other side's a different culture, and they're finding ways to bridge that. And you've seen that as well. And that's where I think, fusion can be a really, really great thing. But, going back to those boundaries, like you're also not trying to just seeing what works for the sake of seeing what works. I feel like there should be intention behind it as well.
Now, we're coming up on the holidays. As much as I'm shocked by that, what are some of the food traditions that you look forward to around the holidays, and maybe share a little bit of your own family's traditions?
Yeah, so many. I mean, with the holidays, I mean, it's tamales is just one thing that is always part of our holidays where we get together and we make tamales, or a family member makes tamales and hands them out. I mean, they're a gift on its own, right? Or
I
literally
love
wrapped up.
tamales.
And then you have your atolls, your drinks, and your champurrado, and these things that are just these foods that are just very warming and comforting that just come along with the holidays. And that's probably what I'm definitely looking forward to.
I'm not familiar with the holiday drinks. Tell me more. What are those?
Yeah. Okay. So you have like your champurrado that is, I mean, that's kind of around all year long now, but it's definitely something that comes out during the holidays as well. And that's made with masa. And it's spiked with cinnamon and all these really great things. Atol is the same thing, in the sense that it's a very warming drink. I mean, you could spike it up. Some people will spike up their atol and add some tequila to it. But these are very heartwarming drinks during the holidays.
Do you have a favorite season? I know that we don't get much moderation of seasons here in Southern California, but is there a favorite time of year that you really look forward to?
I really like our fall, which isn't really a fall, but I really enjoy that time because of exactly what we're just talking about. It's like those dishes that come out that are heartier, that are warming, that provide comfort. And it just is a time where you know that you're going to get together with friends or family, or you can go to a restaurant and enjoy these like specialty items that aren't on the menu year long, but just for that specific time. So definitely the fall.
I couldn't agree more. It is my favorite time of year. We're in the middle of it, and I'm loving it right now. Although the sudden swing in temperatures the last couple of days makes me think we're already back in summer. So, we go straight from fall to summer around here, but such is life in Southern California. We shouldn't be complaining. Cynthia, what are you working on right now in terms of stories that are relevant to the Southern California community?
So I'm an independent journalist, so I write for various publications. So I write for Culture OC, a local publication here to Orange County. I write for LAist, I've written for KCRW, KCET, and all of these platforms have been really great in allowing me to write stories that really matter. So stories that amplify my community, stories that amplify restaurants and chefs and mom and pop spots, and giving a closer look at them. So right now I do have a couple pieces in the works for Eater that will come out later. They're still in the early stages, so I don't know if I can speak on them quite yet. But you can always follow what I'm working on by following me on Instagram. That's pretty much the only social media account I have. And that's at Squeeze My Orange, and that's spelled SQZMYORANG.
Squeeze My Orange. I love it. And yeah, the publications you mentioned, they're all doing great work on food and culture. Cynthia, it has been awesome to chat with you today. I feel like you've unlocked a lot of questions that people might have about Southern California food. Thank you so much for all of your suggestions, and keep on writing all that amazing work you're doing in food and culture for this fantastic community we call Southern California. Thanks again for joining me on Enlightened Omnivore.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that wraps up another episode of Enlightened Omnivore. A special thanks to all my subscribers for listening in this week. You can all read more about everything omnivorous on my weekly Substack newsletter found at enlightenedomnivore.substack.com. We continue to uncover the stories behind our food and the new ways we can live sustainably together. Thank you for tuning in. This is Steve Sabaker reminding you to savor every bite and eat mindfully. Until next time, keep it balanced and stay enlightened. This is Enlightened Omnivore, everything in moderation.